All right, welcome back to Fusion Friday. Today, what we are going to learn is we're going to learn a couple of new techniques in Fusion. First thing is we're going to learn how to turn bodies into components. And this is essential because if you have a larger assembly of multiple bodies that need to come together, in order to actually define those relationships in Fusion 360, we have to create what are called components, which just alters what Fusion is able to do with our three-dimensional shapes. So we're going to learn how to do that, and we're also going to learn how to access the McMaster-Carr library so that we could automatically import certain bits of hardware. For this example, we are going to be importing the four M3 screws that you see now. So let's jump right into it. Okay, so when you're in the sketch, we're going to start by just designing out our little bracket that's shown. The little star bracket. To do this, I'm just going to start with my 20 diameter um, circle in the hole, circle in the center, excuse me, and then create the holes above it. Okay, the outer one has a radius 10 fillet, so that means its diameter is 10 if we were to draw it as a circle, and then we could just add some constraints to lock this whole thing into place. And this is 25 millimeters away, and then we could just use a circular pattern to copy this circle about the center point there. And we want four of those. Okay, next what I'm going to do is just add in that additional side circle. This one has a radius of 20 fillet, so that means if we were to draw it as a circle, we could draw it with a diameter of 40. And I'm just going to drag it a little bit up for right now so I can get it into a good position to work with, and then make it tangent to both of these two circles, and then trim out my excess. Now what I can do is the same thing, do another circular pattern about the center, and we can see our shapes starting to come together. So now I could come back in and trim away at the bottom part of these circles, and we still have a fully constrained sketch after doing that. Now what we could do is we can add the little holes in there for the M3 screw to fit into. Okay, if we look at our design guides, right, and you could find these in your OneNote, we'll see that for an M3 screw, if we want it to be designed for clearance, we just want a diameter of 3.1 millimeters, assuming this is going to be 3D printed. So we can just add that circle right in the center of the other one that is 3.1 millimeters. And then we'll create our last circular pattern. All right, and that's essentially all we have to do for the bracket. So now we can finish our sketch and we can extrude this up. And we want to make it 5 millimeters thick, so we could do that. And right over here, instead of making this operation a new body like you typically would, we want to actually call it a new component. It does the exact same thing physically with the geometry. The only thing it does is, again, it alters what Fusion is able to do with this 3D geometry. So now we have this component 1, and we can just go ahead and rename that to our bracket. All right. So now to draw our base, what we could actually do is we could use the already made bracket as a reference. So I'm going to create a new sketch on this space, and I'm just going to start with my outside perimeter of it, make it a rectangle, and I'm just going to start with a center rectangle that is 65 millimeters by 65 millimeters. Now what I could do is, just based off the position of this current bracket, what I could do is project the circles onto this thing that's going to be our base. So that way we get the positioning directly in line. So I can project and just go ahead and project my circles. And you could access this project command by just pressing the P key on your keyboard. So we'll do that, press OK. And now I actually want to hide this bracket so that I can't see it anymore. So we'll go ahead and hide that, but you see that we still see the circles embedded into our sketch. Okay? And this one, these circles are actually meant to be threaded. Okay, so if we go back to our design guides again, we see that for screwing in, we want a 2.7 millimeter diameter. Okay, with 3D printed objects, the threads on the screws itself can create that little tapped pattern itself if we make that hole exactly 2.7 millimeters. So we'll go ahead and we'll do that. And again, same thing, we'll just create our circular pattern for this thing about the center and 4. And then the last thing we have to do is just add that little fillet. So I'm just going to go ahead and select my fillet tool, grab this, grab that, and it's got a radius of 10 for my fillet. So now I've got my sketch, it's all fully constrained, and we are good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and finish my sketch, and I'm going to extrude this. And when you're extruding it, just make sure you're careful to also get the inside portion of that projected circle, because you want to make sure that you're actually extruding it to be that 2.7. So again, this one is also 5 millimeters thick, and we will make that a new component as well. Okay, again, we'll rename this to our base. All right, so from there, now we have our two components. And right now you see they're kind of like fused together, and we don't want that right now. We want our base to actually be the anchor point. However, since we started with the bracket, right now Fusion thinks the bracket is our anchor point. So if we go ahead and right click on that, we could click on the command unground from parent. And now you see if we click on one of these parts, we could click and drag it and move it freely around the workspace. So we want to lock our base here in place though. So we're going to go ahead and ground our base. And then what we want is we want this to fall perfectly in line so that the holes line up so it's easily accessible for our M3 screws. And to do that, we have to add what's called a joint or a relationship between these two surfaces. Okay? When you are doing joints, if you just click on the joint command, Fusion is smart enough to typically detect what you want it to do most of the time, and it will default to what's called a rigid joint. Depending on the motion of your objects, you may want to add one of these different joints. However, for right now, we are just going to stick with the rigid joint. Whenever you have two components that have holes that are meant to line up with each other, the best place to assign the joints is actually on these holes. So to do that, you want to look underneath and click on, you see how it kind of gives you this little symbol when you get towards the center of this hole? Click on that little symbol of your bracket component. And then on your base, you want to line it up with that same symbol in the center of the hole where that is meant to line up with. And if you just click that, you'll see that Fusion automatically snaps the two together. And if we look at it back from the top view, you'll see that the holes are now perfectly in line with each other, which is exactly what we want. Last thing before we go ahead and import our screws, I'm just going to change my physical material. These are called out to be ABS plastic, so I'm just going to assign ABS plastic to those two things real quick. Okay, next step is going to be to insert our screws. Okay, what we could do is up here in the little insert tab, as long as you're connected to the internet, you'll see an option down here, insert McMaster component. So if we click on that, you see we have access directly to the McMaster library, which is really, really helpful. Essentially shopping through all the McMaster-Carr components and then import them directly into our model. I know the exact model number of the screw that I'm looking for right now, so I'm just going to go ahead and type that in. And you'll see that if we do that, McMaster brings us exactly where we want to go. Now, if we click down here, right now it's loaded to go to SolidWorks, but we actually want to change that to be a 3D step. And then click download. And then you'll see we instantly just have that screw imported into Fusion 360, which is super nice and handy for um, this modeling of our assemblies. And you'll see it automatically creates it as a component as well over here in your browser. So if I need 4 of those, all I have to do is click on the component in the browser and copy and paste that just 4 times. And I'm just going to put them off in space for now and then move them later by assigning joints to my screws. Okay, and then from there, it's very similar to how we assigned the rigid joint from these 2 holes. You just want to assign another rigid joint from the center of the bolt to the center of the hole. And click OK, and then we'll just do that with all 4 of our bolts. And just like that, we now have our finished assembly. So we have our bracket, and we've accurately shown it to hold these M3 screws. So that's a little bit about creating components in Fusion 360 and then importing hardware directly from McMaster-Carr.